I didn't think my day would end with 3 strangers dressed as cops standing on my porch, staring at me like they already knew what they were going to find inside my home. The moment I opened the door, something felt off. Not the usual HOA complaints, not the typical neighborhood noise issues. This was different. Their uniforms looked official at first glance, but the attitude behind their eyes didn't match the calm confidence real officers carry. They were tense. Too tense. Like they were waiting for me to slip up. I remember the way one of them kept shifting his weight, another tapping his fingers against his belt as if he didn't know what that belt was even for. The third man did all the talking, insisting they were here on urgent HOA orders and needed to inspect the inside of my house immediately. That phrase alone sent a chill down my spine. Since when does the HOA send police to people's doors? And why did these men look like they couldn't wait to push themselves inside? Before I could respond, my wife appeared behind me. I didn't hear her footsteps. I just felt the atmosphere change the second she stood next to me. Calm, composed, sharper than any of them expected. She scanned their badges with a single glance, and I saw her expression tighten, not from fear, but from certainty. She knew something I didn't, something they didn't want her to know. She whispered, almost too softly, "They're not real." Her voice didn't shake. Mine did. The lead imposter tried to step closer, repeating that they were authorized to enter under HOA policy. But the more he spoke, the more he exposed himself. His badge number didn't match the design. The patch on his sleeve was outdated. His walkie-talkie wasn't even powered on. And yet, they kept insisting, pressuring, like they expected us to fold under intimidation. What they didn't know was that my wife wasn't just a calm, observant woman. She wasn't just someone with a good sense of danger. She was a U.S. Marshal, something she rarely mentioned, even to our closest friends, because she preferred to keep our home life separate from her job. But that night, those lines blurred whether we wanted them to or not. She slowly reached into her pocket, and for a moment, everything went silent. Even the fake cops stopped pretending. They knew something was coming. She didn't say a word as she flipped open her badge holder. Not dramatically, not aggressively, just enough for them to see the unmistakable shimmer of authority they could never fake. And that's when it happened. The man who had been doing all the talking stepped backward so fast he nearly fell off the porch. The other two exchanged a terrified look, like they had just realized they were dealing with someone way out of their league. One muttered something under his breath. Another cursed. And then all 3 turned around and bolted toward the street. But here's the part that still keeps me awake sometimes. They didn't run like panicked amateurs. They ran like men who had a plan. Like men who expected this moment. Like men who knew something we didn't. And as their footsteps faded into the night, my wife whispered one question that changed everything. What were they really looking for? The moment those fake officers disappeared down the street, the silence felt heavier than their presence. I closed the door slowly, half expecting them to come back. But my wife kept staring outside as if she was trying to memorize the direction they ran. She wasn't shaken, not the way I was. She looked analytical, like she had just stumbled onto a puzzle she wasn't ready to walk away from. I finally asked her what she meant, what she thought they were really looking for, but she didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked toward the living room, locked every window, and pulled the curtain just slightly to glance outside. Only then did she speak. "I've seen that kind of behavior before," she said quietly. "Not from police. From people pretending to be police because they're following someone. Or searching for something." Her words sent a ripple of unease through me. This wasn't about the HOA anymore, if it ever was. But this wasn't the first time our HOA had crossed boundaries either. Months earlier, they'd sent letters, warnings, and even bogus fines over small things. Trash cans left out a few minutes too long, a driveway stain that had been there since we bought the house, even the color of our mailbox. It never made sense. It felt like someone on the board had a personal agenda. And lately, things had escalated in ways I couldn't explain. Random cars parked near our driveway late at night. Neighbors whispering about new HOA rules that no one had formally announced. A board member showing up twice to inspect our backyard fence without notice. I brushed it all off because it felt too ridiculous to take seriously. But now, standing in the aftermath of 3 fake cops at our door, those small incidents didn't feel small anymore. My wife sat down at the edge of the couch, rubbing her temples. She wasn't scared, but she was worried, and that bothered me more than anything. She rarely showed concern, even during the worst moments of her job. If someone like her sensed a deeper threat, it meant things were far from normal. "I don't think this was random," she finally said. "They approached the house like they'd been here before. They knew exactly where to stand so the cameras wouldn't catch their faces. And they checked the driveway first, not the door." I replayed her words in my mind. How would fake cops know the placement of our cameras? How did they know when we were home? How did they know she wouldn't be at work that night? She stood up again, restless. "Someone has been watching us." Hearing that out loud hit me harder than I expected. Not because it sounded impossible, but because it sounded exactly like what I had been trying to ignore. The lingering cars, the HOA's sudden obsession with our property, the unanswered emails, the board meetings moved behind closed doors. Maybe this wasn't about us personally. Maybe it was about something they believed we had, or something they thought we knew. I looked at my wife, hoping she'd give me some reassurance, but instead, she walked toward the hallway, her jaw tight with the kind of tension that comes from instinct, not fear. "Whatever they wanted," she said. "They're not finished." My wife didn't sleep that night, and honestly, neither did I. But while I lay awake replaying every detail, she moved through the house with a quiet, controlled urgency. Checking locks, repositioning cameras, reviewing old footage. I watched her from the hallway, the soft glow of the monitor reflecting off her face. She wasn't panicked. She was calculating. That scared me more than the knock on the door. Around 3 a.m., she called me over. "Look at this," she said, tapping the screen. She rewound footage from 2 nights earlier to a moment I hadn't noticed. A dark SUV had stopped briefly in front of our house, just long enough for someone inside to shine a small light toward our driveway, right where our side camera was angled. The beam flickered almost like a signal. Then the SUV drove away slowly, without headlights. I tried to convince myself it was just a random passerby, but she shook her head. They were mapping blind spots. For a second, I couldn't breathe. They'd been preparing. But then something else hit me. Something I hadn't said out loud because it sounded too absurd. "Why us?" I finally asked. "We don't have anything. We're not involved in anything." She didn't answer, and that silence stung. Not because she didn't know, but because she wasn't ready to tell me what she suspected. While we watched the footage, a text popped up on her phone. She glanced at it quickly and turned the screen away. That wasn't like her. She usually kept everything open, honest. But tonight, she slipped the phone into her pocket and brushed past me with a quiet, "Let's focus." A small part of me felt pushed out, like there was a piece of this puzzle she wasn't sharing. And maybe that was my own flaw, my need to feel in control when things stopped making sense. The next day, the HOA made it worse. A letter appeared taped to our door, claiming we had violated inspection compliance guidelines and threatening further action. No signature. No specific violation listed, just pressure. Watching my wife read it, I saw something unusual pass through her expression. Not fear, not anger, but recognition. As if the pieces were forming a shape only she could see. Later, she suggested we attend the upcoming HOA meeting. "I need to see who shows up," she said. The way she said need made something twist in my chest. This wasn't about a neighborhood dispute anymore. It was about someone crossing lines. But that wasn't the only subplot unfolding. Our neighbor, Mrs. Collins, quiet, elderly, always tending her garden, approached me while I was taking out the trash. She looked around nervously before whispering, "Be careful. They've been asking questions about your wife. Strange men. Not from the neighborhood." Her voice trembled, like she already regretted saying it. I thanked her, but my mind was racing. Why her? Why ask a harmless neighbor about my wife? And what exactly were they trying to learn? By evening, tension filled the house like thick air. My wife was cleaning her badge holder, something she only did when she felt a storm coming. I watched her hands, steady and deliberate, and realized that whatever was unfolding wasn't new to her. She had seen patterns like this before, maybe even lived through them. And that led me to the one question that kept tightening around me like a rope. What part of her past had finally caught up to our front door? The night before the HOA meeting felt like the air itself was warning us. Too still, too quiet. Even the neighborhood dogs, usually barking at anything that moved, stayed silent. My wife sat at the kitchen table, her eyes fixed on a small stack of documents she'd been reviewing for hours. She didn't say what they were, but I could tell they weren't from her job. The edges were worn, old, personal. I finally broke the silence. "You're not telling me something." She didn't look up. Not at first. When she finally did, her expression softened, just for a moment before tightening again. "It's better if you don't know yet." "Yet," I repeated. A pause. Heavy, like she was picking each word carefully. "There's someone on that HOA board who isn't who they pretend to be." My chest tightened. "Connected to the fake cops?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Before I could push for more, the doorbell rang. One sharp chime. We froze. Neither of us moved. Not right away. My wife reached instinctively for her badge holder. Not to show it, but to remind herself who she was. Then she walked to the window beside the door and barely lifted the curtain. Her breath hitched. That alone made my pulse spike. "Who is it?" She kept staring. "No uniform." "But he's waiting. Not knocking again." Something about that scared me more than the fake cops. Someone confident enough to wait silently on a stranger's doorstep was someone with a reason to be there. She motioned for me to step back as she opened the door just an inch. A man stood there, tall, in a dark jacket with an HOA lanyard around his neck. Bland face. Calm expression. Too calm. "Evening," he said, voice steady. "We need to discuss last night's misunderstanding." My wife didn't open the door further. "Which misunderstanding?" she asked. Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, almost. "The officers sent to your home. I understand there was an incident." "Officers." He said it like he believed it, or wanted us to. I stepped forward, unable to stay quiet. "Those weren't real cops." He smiled slowly. "That's your interpretation." Interpretation. The word hit wrong. Deliberate. Manipulative. My wife leaned in closer, her voice low. "What do you want?" The man's smile faded. "Compliance." One word. Cold. "There are certain matters the HOA needs your cooperation with. You've been unresponsive." The hallway seemed to narrow around us. He glanced over her shoulder into our home, not aggressively, but knowingly, as if he already understood its layout, as if he'd been here before. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "And your wife's background makes this sensitive." My wife stiffened. He shouldn't have known anything about her background. Not a thing. Before she could respond, he stepped back from the door and spoke quietly, almost politely. "We'll talk more at the meeting. Both of you should attend." He turned and walked away, not waiting for an answer. We stayed frozen in the doorway until he disappeared around the corner. When she finally closed the door, her hands were trembling. Not from fear, but from restraint. Controlled anger. Something she rarely showed. "He knows," she whispered. "Knows what?" I asked. She didn't answer. She just looked at me, eyes filled with something between warning and apology, and said the 6 words that pulled us straight toward the breaking point. "You're not safe if you know." The next morning, the tension didn't ease. It grew sharper, like a blade pressed against my chest. I couldn't stop thinking about the man on the doorstep. How did he know about my wife's background? And why was the HOA suddenly so involved in our lives? But before I could process it all, another shock came. I opened my laptop to check emails and froze. There it was, an anonymous message in the inbox. No subject line, just one line. "You're hiding something bigger than you think. Trust no one, not even the ones closest to you." My heart skipped. I showed it to my wife. She scanned it, her face unreadable. "I was afraid of this," she whispered. "It's not just the HOA. They've been watching us for months." Who? I asked. She shook her head. I don't know all of them yet, but there's someone inside the board helping them. Someone I trusted. I felt my stomach drop. Betrayal. From someone we saw every week. Someone we waved to at block parties. Someone we laughed with. The idea made my head spin. Then she added something that made the air feel heavier. I don't think last night's fake cops were just intimidation. They were probing. Looking for a document. Something tied to an old investigation I was part of. Long before we moved here. I blinked. An investigation? You never said anything. I never thought it would come to our doorstep, she said, her voice steady but tight. And now it has. We can't ignore it. While we spoke, my phone buzzed. A neighbor's name flashed, Mrs. Collins. I answered hesitantly. Listen, she said, whispering urgently. You're in danger. Not from the HOA alone. They've been meeting with outsiders, people I think are professionals. I saw them checking cameras on your property last week. Before I could ask more, the call ended. I looked at my wife. This is bigger than we imagined. She nodded. And there's one more complication. Someone close to you might be leaking information. I need you to be careful. Every interaction matters now. Trust no one outside this house. Her words hit hard. I realized the plot had shifted. It wasn't just HOA corruption or petty intimidation. It was personal. It was a web of surveillance, hidden agendas, and people masquerading as friends. Then came the final twist. My wife's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her expression changing in an instant from calm to disbelief. It's him, she whispered. The man who approached our door last night. He's not who we think. He's connected to the case I worked years ago. And he's been watching us under the HOA cover the entire time. I felt my pulse racing. The person we thought we could ignore, the HOA we dismissed as overbearing neighbors, they were just pawns in something much larger. The stakes had escalated. Not just property disputes, not just threats, they wanted something. And whatever it was, they wouldn't stop until they got it. I looked at my wife, searching her face for answers. She met my gaze, her eyes filled with tension, urgency, and the kind of resolve that comes only when a storm is about to break. And I realized one terrifying truth. Nothing we thought we knew was real, and every choice from this moment on could either save us or destroy us. The night of the HOA meeting arrived, but it wasn't a normal neighborhood gathering. The hall smelled faintly of polished wood and tension. Chairs were arranged in neat rows, the fluorescent lights harsh and unforgiving. My wife and I walked in, side by side, hearts pounding. Every glance around the room made me question who was ally and who was waiting to strike. The board president rose, greeting us with a fake, practiced smile. Thank you for attending. We have some matters to discuss regarding compliance. His words sounded hollow, rehearsed. I noticed subtle nods exchanged between a few board members. The same calculating look we'd seen on the man at our door, the one who had stirred everything into motion. My wife stepped forward, calm but resolute, revealing her U.S. Marshal badge openly this time. The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. The same officers who had tried to intimidate us, the impostors, were there too, seated quietly among the board members, pretending to be legal consultants. One of them, the man who had been bold enough to step onto our porch, froze when he saw her. Recognition flashed across his face. Then fear. He leaned toward a colleague and whispered something I couldn't hear. Everyone, my wife's voice rang out, steady and commanding. I am a U.S. Marshal, and these individuals posing as law enforcement at our home last week were part of a coordinated scheme to intimidate me. And through me, She let the words hang. The tension was thick enough to suffocate. The board members shifted uneasily. Some avoided her gaze. Others whispered among themselves. I saw the man at our door suddenly stand and bolt for the exit, but my wife anticipated it. A deputy badge she had concealed from sight glimmered in her hand, and she motioned toward the hall's security cameras. Run, and your faces and actions will be in federal evidence. Consider this your only warning. He stopped mid-step, eyes wide, sweat beading at his temples. Slowly, he sank back into his seat, realizing escape wasn't an option. Then came the twist we hadn't expected. One board member, the quiet woman who always appeared so harmless, stood up. She confessed, trembling. She had been the inside informant, feeding the impostors details about our home and routines. Her voice shook, but she explained she had done it out of fear for her own family. She revealed locations, names, and plans we hadn't known existed, unraveling the network of deception completely. I felt a mix of shock, anger, and relief. Justice, it seemed, had arrived not through brute force but through exposure. The impostors were restrained. The board members who had abetted them were facing consequences, and the HOA's false authority crumbled under the weight of truth. Afterward, as we walked home, hand in hand, I realized the final revelation wasn't just about the impostors or the HOA. It was about trust, loyalty, and courage under pressure. My wife's calm resolve had saved us, but it also reminded me that danger often comes disguised as the familiar. And just as I was about to breathe, thinking the nightmare had ended, she leaned in, whispered softly, "There's one more name we need to check, someone higher up than we realized. And they've been watching from the shadows all along." Even in resolution, the story wasn't truly over. After the chaos of the HOA meeting, our neighborhood finally felt quiet. The impostors were gone, the corrupt board members exposed, and the immediate threat lifted. Yet, the house still carried the echoes of tension, the memories of footsteps, the whispers of deception, the moments we had feared the worst. I realized that peace doesn't arrive suddenly. It lingers quietly, in the small breaths between storms. My wife and I spent the following days reviewing what had happened, piecing together every detail. The quiet board member who confessed had saved us from further danger, and even though her actions had caused weeks of paranoia, we understood her fear. Her arc, from secret informant to a woman choosing honesty under pressure, reminded me that people are rarely purely good or evil. They are shaped by circumstance, by fear, and by hope. Neighbors we once barely spoke to started approaching us, apologizing for past suspicions or odd behavior, admitting they had been misled by the board. It was a subtle healing, a reassurance that not everyone in the community was a pawn in a game of manipulation. The network of deceit had fractured, and in its absence, empathy and connection quietly returned. For my wife, the experience reinforced her own principles. She had always acted with precision and courage, but this ordeal demanded more than skill. It demanded restraint, compassion, and trust in the truth. Watching her navigate the confrontation with confidence, yet never losing her human warmth, made me appreciate her strength even more. It reminded me that authority isn't just about power. It's about responsibility and protection, even when the danger is personal. As for me, I learned a lesson I hadn't anticipated. Vigilance doesn't mean fear, and courage doesn't require recklessness. The way we chose to respond, calmly, strategically, but with heart, was what allowed us to survive the storm intact. I realized that ordinary people can face extraordinary threats, but the way we confront them defines who we are. We repaired what was broken in our home. Cameras stayed in place, not as tools of surveillance, but as reassurance that our boundaries were respected. The porch, once a stage for intimidation, became a symbol of resilience. And though the shadow of someone higher up lingered, we faced the future with awareness, not paranoia. Sometimes, I catch myself looking at my wife as she tends to everyday tasks, the weight of her past hidden behind her calm expression, and I'm reminded, life doesn't hand us perfect endings, but it does offer lessons, courage, and the chance to protect those we love. And if there's one takeaway from everything we endured, it's this: trust your instincts, value the truth, and never underestimate the quiet strength of someone standing beside you. Because in the end, safety isn't just about locks and cameras. It's about vigilance, love, and courage. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply stand firm, even when the world outside your door seems intent on breaking in. So, if you're watching this story unfold, remember, don't ignore the warning signs, protect your space, and cherish the allies who have your back. You never know when a calm hand, a clear mind, and unwavering courage could save everything that matters most. If you enjoyed the story, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And stay tuned. The next story is coming soon.